Welcome to Chess and Intelligence, where every move tells a story. Here, strategy meets brilliance, and one mistake can change everything. Let's dive into the game. Carlsen develops knight to f3, calmly bringing his cavalry to the field as the opening spark begins. Wesley replies with pawn to b6, preparing a queenside fianchetto and eyeing central counterplay. Carlsen pushes pawn to c4, staking space on the queenside and tightening grip over the board. Wesley develops bishop to b7, the long diagonal weapon now pointing deep into enemy lines. Carlsen places knight on c3, reinforcing central control and setting up flexible options. Wesley suddenly plays bishop takes f3, exchanging early and disrupting white's natural structure. Carlsen recaptures with pawn xf3, doubling pawns but strengthening his central grip. Wesley strikes with pawn e6, building his pawn wall and opening lines for development. Carlsen boldly advances pawn forward, throwing force into the center and seizing space. Wesley answers with pawn shix, reinforcing d5 and tightening his defensive structure. Carlsen plays pawn g3, preparing a fianchetto and supporting his central presence. Wesley mirrors with pawn g6, ready to deploy his dark-squared bishop on the deadly diagonal. Carlsen places bishop on g2, completing his fianchetto setup and guarding key squares. Wesley responds with bishop g7, forming a symmetrical fortress and aiming at white's center. Carlsen castles Kingside, ensuring king's safety before the real battle erupts. Wesley castles Kingside too, both monarchs now shielded as tension builds. Carlsen pushes pawn h4, launching a pawn storm on the king's side with fiery intent. Wesley reacts with pawn h5, halting the advance and locking the wing in sharp tension. Carlsen reinforces with pawn d3, stabilizing the center and preparing for central play. Wesley counters with pawn d5, striking back boldly in the middle of the board. Carlsen lifts queen to e2, connecting rooks and pressuring the e-file for future tactics. Wesley centralizes with rook e8, lining heavy artillery on the same file as white's queen. Carlsen improves with rook a1, doubling firepower on the e-file and adding to the pressure. Wesley jumps knight to 5, planting his steed aggressively in the heart of the fight. Carlsen calmly develops bishop to d2, protecting key squares and preparing his rooks. Wesley retreats knight to d7, rerouting for better coordination and flexible defense. Carlsen activates rook cone, placing it on the open file and pressuring black's queenside. Wesley mirrors with rook c8, directly challenging white's rook and contesting control. Carlsen thrusts pawn b4, expanding on the queenside and grabbing more territory. Wesley responds with pawn a6, preventing b5 and preparing his own countermeasures. Carlsen advances pawn a4, tightening his grip and pushing for queenside initiative. Wesley brings knight to f6, repositioning his horse and strengthening kingside defense. Carlsen pushes pawn b5, driving into the queenside and testing black's defenses. Wesley answers with pawn axe b5, capturing cleanly and opening the a-file. Carlsen recaptures with pawn at c5, maintaining pressure and keeping queenside tension alive. Wesley leaps knight to d4, planting his horse deep in enemy territory with venomous intent. Carlsen retreats queen to dun, keeping control and avoiding immediate tactics. Wesley pushes pawn cxb5, strengthening his structure and creating a dangerous passed pawn. Carlsen develops bishop to e3, aiming at the knight and securing central squares. Wesley counters with knight f5, an aggressive outpost strike, threatening white's bishop and center. Carlsen sacrifices knight takes b5, capturing material but exposing himself to counterplay. Wesley slashes with rook takes cone, forcing exchanges and seizing the initiative. Carlsen recaptures with queen takes cone, holding ground but under mounting pressure. Wesley storms in with knight g4, leaping into attack position and targeting white's king. Carlsen invades queen to 7, entering black's camp and threatening dangerous counterplay. Wesley responds ruthlessly with knight takes e3, removing a key defender and ripping white apart. Carlsen counters with queen takes date, exchanging queens to reduce immediate fire. Wesley calmly recaptures rook takes d8, regaining balance while keeping threats alive. Carlsen eliminates knight with pawn takes g3, finally clearing the intruder from his kingside. Wesley strikes back with knight 5, replanting his steed aggressively in the center. Carlsen pushes pawn d4, grabbing space and driving back black's control. Wesley sacrifices knight takes e3, tearing apart white's pawn shield once again. Carlsen accepts with rook takes e3, trying to consolidate but giving black activity. Wesley responds bishop takes d4, slicing through the center with authority. Carlsen steps king to f2, centralizing for defense and covering key files. Wesley activates rook to sate, occupying the open file and menacing white's position. Carlsen strikes with knight takes d5, snapping material in hopes of countering. Wesley calmly moves king to g7, stepping aside and preparing to support his army. Carlsen centralizes king to f3, marching boldly into the fray to support his troops. Wesley captures bishop takes e3, removing white's active piece with precision. Carlsen recaptures king takes e3, grabbing the bishop but straying into danger. Wesley thrusts pawn to b5, his queenside forces rolling forward like tanks. Carlsen replies bishop to f4, anchoring defense and holding crucial diagonals. Wesley seizes open ground with rook cone, invading white's camp with heavy artillery. Carlsen's king captures on e3, stepping boldly into the center to reclaim material and take direct command of his scattered forces. Wesley So pushes pawn to b5, smashing into the queenside and opening files that will fuel his forward pieces. Carlsen brings bishop to f4, centralizing the piece to exert pressure and try to blunt black's queenside momentum. Wesley So slides his rook to cone, invading white's first rank and planting heavy artillery deep inside enemy territory. Carlsen storms pawn to f5, a gutsy thrust aimed at prying open lines and unsettling black's compact structure. Wesley So captures gsf5, pawn from g6 takes on f5, ripping open the kingside and exposing white's fragile shelter. Carlsen replies with bishop takes f5. The bishop recaptures on f5 and heats up threats toward the black king. Wesley So swings his rook to hone, a stealthy invasion onto the first rank threatening white's back rank's safety. Carlsen retreats bishop to 7, repositioning the piece to contest black's advanced pawns and chase counterchances. Wesley So captures with rook takes h4. Rook takes the pawn on h4 and tears further holes in white's kingside. Carlsen strikes back with bishop takes b5. The bishop captures on b5 to regain material and reduce black's pressure. Wesley So returns rook to hone, reclaiming the first rank post and keeping the white king under lethal tension. Carlsen slides bishop to e2, reorganizing defenses and blocking lines to his endangered monarch with calm determination. Wesley So steps his king to h6, his monarch marching forward to support pawns and tighten the attacking net. Carlsen leaps knight to f4. The knight invades to contest key squares, an attempt to blunt black's sharp pieces. Wesley So pushes pawn to h4, a brutal pawn thrust that drives deeper into white's position and fuels the assault. Carlsen repositions bishop to f3, placing a guardian near his king and trying to parry the incoming onslaught. Wesley So slips rook to a1, invading the queenside first rank and preparing to switch pressure across the board. Carlsen tucks bishop to g2, consolidating diagonals and hoping to trade off attackers to survive the storm. Wesley So advances his king to g5, boldly bringing his monarch into the attack as an active and terrifying piece. Carlsen bolts knight to h3 with check, a desperate jump hoping to disrupt black's coordination and buy vital time. Wesley So strides his king to g4, shrugging off checks and pressing his royal presence ever deeper into enemy lines. Carlsen steps king to f2, moving toward the center to try to coordinate his remaining forces for survival. Wesley So slides rook to a2, delivering check, slicing across ranks and forcing white's king further into a trap. Carlsen slips back to gone, his monarch seeking shelter in the corner but with dwindling escape options. Wesley So marches his king to g3, the attacking sovereign now shoulder to shoulder with his pieces in white's camp. Carlsen pulls bishop to f1, erecting a last-ditch bastion beside his monarch to block mating nets. Wesley So thrusts pawn to f6, shoring up his structure and preparing the final pawn blows to finish the job. Carlsen sidesteps king to hone, tucked into the corner yet still under the shadow of black's forces. Wesley So crashes rook to h2-1, swinging the heavy piece in with a checking strike that tightens the noose. Carlsen's king staggers back to gone, desperately seeking any respite while the attacking machinery closes in. Wesley So delivers rook takes h3. Rook captures the knight on h3 and lands the final crushing blow. White resigns. This match showed us how intelligence and patience win in chess. Thanks for watching Chess and Intelligence. Make sure to subscribe and continue the journey with our next game. No.